a shy waitress. There, was hired to fake an engagement until one silent sign shattered a billionaire's lie. Shy waitress pretended to be billionaire's fiancé for his deaf mom. One sign changed everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe, tap the notification bell, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Ready? Let us begin. Now, let us go back to our main character. The rain fell steadily over Manchester that evening, turning the cobblestone streets into shimmering mirrors. Inside, a small café called the Linen Fox, the air smelled of roasted coffee and damp wool. The low hum of jazz blended with the clinking of cups. Behind the counter, Elara wiped the same spot for the 5th time, her mind a blur of unpaid bills and her brother's medical forms piled at home. The doorbell chimed. A tall man stepped in, shaking rain from his black coat. His name was Adrian Ward, the kind of man whose presence made the room shift, like the air forgot how to move for a second. His dark hair was slicked from the rain, his jaw tight with something unspoken. He approached the counter without a greeting, setting a thick envelope on the wood between them. "Miss, I need your help," he said, his voice low but urgent. "For 2 days, you will pretend to be my fiancé." Elara blinked, certain she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" Adrian opened the envelope and slid a printed document toward her. The paper bore a title in bold, Temporary Engagement Agreement. A sapphire ring rested on top of it, catching the cafe's golden light. "My mother is in the hospital," he continued, his tone softening for the first time. "She lost her hearing after surgery. The doctors are not sure she has much time left. The only thing she wants is to meet the woman I love." Elara's fingers tightened around the rag in her hand. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you know sign language," he replied. "I have seen you use it before with the boy who comes here every morning. My mother reads hands, not lips. I need her to believe she is not leaving this world alone." Outside, thunder rolled through the Manchester sky. Inside, the air seemed to hold its breath. Elara looked down at her hands, the hands that once taught her younger brother the alphabet in silence, the hands that had held everything together when words failed. She took a slow step back. "I cannot lie to someone who is dying." Adrian's eyes met hers. They were tired, but sincere. "Then do not lie," he said softly. "Just help me give her peace." The cafe clock ticked. Somewhere in the distance, a tram bell rang through the rain. Elara exhaled, feeling the weight of every reason to say no. But when she looked at the sapphire glinting under the warm light, something inside her wavered. A contract. A ring. A silent promise. She did not know it yet, but this was the moment her life and his would change forever. The next morning, Manchester was gray and soaked in drizzle. The streets glistened under the early light, and the trams hummed through puddles as if the whole city had forgotten the word warmth. Inside her small apartment above a bakery, Elara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the sapphire ring resting in her palm. It looked absurd there, bright, expensive, and out of place among chipped mugs and unpaid bills. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian Ward's face across the cafe counter, calm yet desperate, and heard his voice again. "Just help me give her peace." On the table beside her sat a stack of envelopes. Rent overdue. Electricity notice. A new message blinked on her phone. Street, Mary's medical center, reminding her of her brother's therapy payment due that week. Her chest tightened. Her brother, Leo, had been deaf since birth. When their parents passed away, she became his guardian, his translator, his world. The thought of missing a payment, of interrupting his therapy, made her stomach twist. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "It is just 2 days." A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Adrian standing there, his coat damp with rain, holding 2 cups of coffee. His gaze was softer than last night's, but still guarded. "I know this is sudden," he said, handing her a cup, "but my mother's condition is getting worse. She keeps asking when she will meet you." Elara hesitated. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he replied quietly. "You work hard. You care for your brother. You know how to speak in silence. That is all I need right now." She looked down, unsure whether to feel flattered or frightened. "You have already planned everything, have you not?" He nodded once. The hospital will allow visitors tomorrow. After that, there is a small family dinner, 2 appearances. Then you never have to see me again. Elara's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The warmth bled through her skin, grounding her. And the payment for Leo's therapy? It will be handled, Adrian said. His tone was matter-of-fact, but there was no arrogance in it. You have my word. For a long moment, they stood there in the narrow hallway, the smell of coffee and rain filling the air between them. Finally, she stepped aside. All right, come in. We should talk about the details. He entered, scanning the small apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the potted plant fighting for sunlight, the photo of Leo framed on the wall. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of guilt or admiration she could not read. He placed a thin folder on the table. These are the terms. Nothing complicated. You accompany me, wear this ring, and let my mother believe we are engaged. In return, I cover every expense you have mentioned. Elara took a seat, flipping through the pages. Her eyes caught one line printed in bold. The arrangement ends immediately following the second event. It sounds easy when you say it, she murmured, signing her name with a trembling hand. But pretending to be someone's love, that is not something I have done before. Adrian looked at her, his voice low. Neither have I. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind that felt like a secret waiting to unfold. He stood, buttoning his coat. I will pick you up tomorrow at 10. Dress simple. My mother never cared for extravagance. When he left, the room felt both emptier and too full. Elara sat alone, tracing the edge of the ring with her thumb. Outside, the Manchester rain kept falling, steady and relentless, like a clock counting down to the moment her ordinary life would end. And for the first time in years, she whispered into the quiet room, Please, let this not be another mistake. The following morning arrived with a cold mist clinging to the windows of Elara's small apartment. She stood before the mirror, adjusting the soft beige dress she had borrowed from her neighbor. It was simple, modest, but it made her look like someone who belonged to a quieter world than the one she had known. Her fingers brushed the sapphire ring that now circled her hand. The blue stone caught the morning light, reflecting it against her skin like a quiet promise she did not fully understand. A knock sounded. When she opened the door, Adrian Ward was there again, sharp in a charcoal suit. The rain had left his hair slightly tousled, softening his usually guarded expression. You look perfect, he said, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, you look appropriate. Elara gave a faint smile. Appropriate sounds safer. He motioned to the car parked outside, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place on her narrow street. The driver stepped forward to open the door, but Elara hesitated for a brief second before sliding in. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cologne. Through the window, Manchester blurred. Past brick buildings, flower stalls, people under umbrellas, all fading into streaks of gray. Adrian spoke quietly. When we arrive, the hospital staff already know the story. They believe we have been engaged for 6 months. You will wear the ring. I will handle the questions. And your mother? She asked. She will believe what she wants to believe, he said. She has wanted this for so long. Let her have it. The drive ended at St. Mary's Medical Center, its stone facade damp from the drizzle. Inside, the air was heavy with the clean scent of antiseptic and roses. Adrian led her through long hallways until they reached a private suite at the far end. His mother sat by the window, a graceful woman with silver hair, wrapped in a soft wool blanket. The machines near her bed hummed softly, a rhythm of fragile life. When she turned, her eyes clear and intelligent lit up. Elara froze for a heartbeat. Adrian signed gently with his hands. Mother, this is her, the woman I told you about. The older woman's smile was slow but radiant. She lifted her trembling hands and signed back. She is beautiful. You did well. Elara felt her throat tighten. For a moment, she forgot that this was all an act. She stepped closer, took the woman's hand, and signed carefully, her movements steady. It is an honor to meet you. The woman's expression softened with emotion. She touched Elara's cheek, then looked at her son with watery eyes. The silence in the room was full. No sound, yet more conversation than words could ever hold. Later, as they left the room, Elara walked beside Adrian down the sterile hallway, her heartbeat unsteady. "She is remarkable," Elara said softly. "I can see why you wanted her to have peace." Adrian nodded, his jaw tight. "When I was a boy, she taught me sign language. After the surgery, she lost her hearing completely. I have not seen her smile like that in years." They stepped outside into the gray. Afternoon. Rain misted against their faces. Elara turned to him. "It felt real in there," she admitted. "Too real." Adrian met her gaze. "Maybe that is the point." He opened the car door for her, his hand brushing hers just slightly. The touch lingered longer than it should have, and neither of them spoke as they drove away. Back in her apartment later that night, Elara removed the sapphire ring and set it on the table beside her. The sound of it against the wood was soft but final. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind looping through the memory of the mother's smile. This was supposed to be a transaction, a favor born out of pity and need, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she was no longer sure which part of this story was pretend and which part had already started to become real. The next day began before dawn, with the sky over Manchester painted in shades of silver and pale blue. A black car waited outside Elara's apartment once again, but this time the air felt different, less tense, almost anticipatory. Inside the car, Adrian Ward sat reviewing a folder, his expression unreadable. When she stepped in, he closed it quietly and gave her a nod that seemed less formal, almost gentle. "We have a dinner tonight," he said as they drove through the wet streets. "It is a private event at my family's estate just outside the city. There will be board members and investors. They expect to meet you." Elara looked down at her plain coat, her hands folded in her lap. "Then they will be very disappointed." Adrian's lips curved into the faintest smile. "We can fix that." By noon, she found herself standing in front of a tall stone mansion surrounded by ivy and rain-darkened gardens. The house loomed like a piece of history, old money, old expectations. Inside, the staff moved quietly, preparing for the evening. A stylist rushed forward as soon as Elara stepped in, carrying hangers draped in silk and satin. "This was not part of the deal," she murmured. "It is necessary," Adrian replied simply. "They need to see you as my equal." Hours later, she stood before a mirror again, but this reflection was nothing like the girl who served coffee in the northern quarter. The stylist had pinned her hair into soft waves, her makeup subtle yet striking. The navy gown fit perfectly, the sapphire ring gleaming like it belonged there all along. She hardly recognized herself. When Adrian entered the room, even he paused for a moment. His usual composure faltered. "You look—" He cleared his throat. "You look perfect." She turned toward him, teasing lightly. "I thought you preferred the word appropriate." For the first time, he laughed an unguarded, genuine sound that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. The evening arrived with rain tapping against the tall windows of the dining hall. Guests filled the room with polite laughter and the sound of clinking glasses. Adrian's arm brushed against hers as he guided her through the introductions. His voice carried steady confidence, but every time his gaze met hers, something in it softened. One of the board members, an older man with a sharp tone, eyed her curiously. "So this is the woman who tamed Manchester's most unreachable bachelor," he said, half joking, half probing. "Tell me, how did you two meet?" Elara froze for a fraction of a second, but Adrian slipped his hand over hers, steady and sure. "We met at the café where she worked," he said smoothly. "She spilled coffee on me before she even asked my name." The guests laughed. Elara managed to smile, feeling the tension ease. For the rest of the dinner, she played her role flawlessly, answering with warmth that surprised even herself. She caught the approving glances from the guests, the subtle nods from Adrian's mother seated at the head of the table, her eyes proud and peaceful. Later, when the guests had gone and the mansion fell into quiet, Elara wandered out to the terrace. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and clean. Manchester's skyline glimmered faintly in the distance. Adrian joined her, hands in his pockets, the glow from the terrace lamps painting soft lines across his face. "You handled tonight better than I ever could have expected," he said. "I suppose waitressing teaches you more about people than most jobs," she replied, her tone light. He looked at her for a long moment. "You keep surprising me." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged with something neither contract nor reason could define. Then Elara stepped back, reminding herself silently, "This is not real." "Tomorrow," Adrian said finally, his voice quiet. "The last event. After that, it will all be over." She nodded, pretending not to feel the sting of those words. But as she looked down at the sapphire ring, catching the light from the city below, she wondered if some stories were meant to last longer than the agreements that began them. The morning after the dinner came with a quiet drizzle, soft and endless, like the city itself was exhaling. Elara woke to the faint buzz of her phone and the realization that she had dreamed about the previous night. The laughter, the flicker of candlelight, and Adrian Ward's voice still lingered in her mind. It had all felt so real, too real for something that was meant to be a performance. By 10 o'clock, the car was waiting again. Today was the final event, the family celebration for Adrian's mother's birthday. After tonight, their agreement would end, and Elara would return to her small apartment above the bakery as if none of it had ever happened. At the mansion, the preparations were already underway. The scent of flowers filled the air, and soft classical music drifted through the hallways. Adrian met her at the entrance, dressed in a dark suit that matched the sky outside. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I can be for pretending to belong in a mansion," she said lightly, trying to mask her nerves. He gave a small smile. "You belong more than you think." The celebration began just after noon. Close friends and a few family members filled the grand room. Mrs. Ward sat in her wheelchair, her eyes sparkling as she watched her son and the woman she believed to be his future wife. Elara knelt beside her, signing gently. "Happy birthday. You look beautiful today." The older woman's expression melted with joy. She reached out and held Elara's face with both hands, signing back with trembling fingers. "You are a blessing. Promise me you will take care of him." Elara hesitated, her eyes welling. The lie had never felt heavier than in that moment. She nodded, signing softly, "I promise." A murmur spread across the room as one of the guests approached with a glass raised. "To the happy couple," he said loudly, "we are all waiting for the wedding announcement." The crowd laughed and cheered. Adrian's hand brushed hers under the table, steadying her. "Just breathe," he whispered. Elara smiled for the audience, her heart pounding. When she turned to meet his gaze, something flickered between them, an understanding neither of them could deny anymore. The room seemed to fade, the noise dimming to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. Later, when the guests began to leave, Mrs. Ward asked for one last moment with them. She took both their hands and looked from one face to the other. Even without words, her eyes spoke volumes. She believed in what she saw: love, connection, truth. And for the first time, Elara wished that belief was not built on a lie. That night, after everyone had gone, Elara stood alone in the garden behind the mansion. The rain had stopped, and the lamps glowed softly against the wet stones. She turned the sapphire ring on her finger, wondering how something that started as a contract could feel, so heartbreakingly real. Adrian joined her, his coat draped loosely over his shoulders. "You did more for my mother than any doctor could have," he said quietly. "She is happy, and that means more than I can ever repay." "You do not owe me anything," Elara replied. "Maybe I needed this too." He studied her face for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Tomorrow, the contract ends, but if you would rather stay until she recovers, I would like that." She smiled, small and uncertain. "Let us see what tomorrow brings." The rain began again, soft and persistent. She looked up, closing her eyes, letting the drops touch her skin. The story that began with a lie had already taken root in something far deeper. And as the mansion lights glowed behind them, the city of Manchester hummed quietly, unaware that somewhere within its gray heart, two strangers had started to believe in something real. If this fake marriage universe pulls you in, subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter. The soft light of late afternoon spilled through the windows of the Ward estate, casting gold across the polished marble floors. The celebration was over, but the echoes of laughter still lingered in the halls. For the first time since it all began, Elara felt like the quiet had weight, heavy, expectant, almost fragile. The next morning she helped Mrs. Ward into the garden. The older woman's hands trembled as she traced a blooming rose. "Beautiful," she signed, her smile soft and calm. Elara nodded, holding the blanket tighter around her shoulders. There was something peaceful in the air, the kind of peace that often comes before change. When Adrian joined them, his usual guarded expression was gone. He stood beside his mother, his hand resting gently on her wheelchair. The three of them stayed like that for a long while, without words, only the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of the city below. That evening, after Mrs. Ward had gone to rest, Adrian and Elara shared dinner in the quiet dining room. No guests, no pretense. Just the two of them, and the flicker of candlelight between their plates. "You could stay," Adrian said after a long silence. "Not for the contract, not for the appearances, just stay." Elara's fork paused mid-air. "You know I cannot do that," she said softly. "Your world, it is not mine. It could be," he insisted, leaning forward. "You belong here more than you think. My mother adores you. The board respects you. And I—" He stopped himself, exhaling. "I do not want this to end like a transaction." Elara looked at him, her heart aching at the honesty in his voice. "That is exactly why it has to end," she whispered. Outside, the rain began to fall again, Manchester's quiet lullaby. 2 days later, Mrs. Ward's condition worsened. The doctors whispered in low tones, the machines beeped in steady rhythm. Elara stayed by her bedside, signing softly to calm her as Adrian stood by the window, silent and helpless. When it was time, Mrs. Ward's final gesture was simple. She took their hands and pressed them together. Her eyes filled with peace as if to say, "Do not waste what love gives you." Then the monitors fell silent. The funeral was small, private. Rain fell steadily over the black umbrellas gathered under the gray sky. Adrian stood beside Elara, his hand finding hers without thought. He did not let go. That night, back at the mansion, he poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. The room was dim, quiet but alive with memory. "She loved you," he said, "more than anyone I have ever brought into this house." Elara looked at the ring still on her finger, the sapphire glinting faintly in the firelight. "It was supposed to be temporary," she said. "Some things are meant to start as lies," he replied, "so we can find the truth inside them." For the first time, she let herself smile, a real smile, one that carried both grief and hope. She reached out and touched his hand, their fingers interlocking naturally, as if the promise had already been made long ago. Outside, the Manchester rain eased into a drizzle, and the city lights shimmered like new beginnings waiting to unfold. Neither of them spoke, but in the quiet of that room, the contract that once bound them had transformed no longer paper and ink, but something real, fragile, and alive. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she wanted to find out with him. The weeks after the funeral passed quietly. Adrian Ward threw himself into work, and the mansion that once felt alive now echoed with silence. Elara stayed in Manchester, helping close the foundation Mrs. Ward had started. It gave her purpose, but every time she walked past the grand gates of the Ward estate, she felt the ache of unfinished words. One gray afternoon, while she was sorting documents at the foundation office, a headline flashed on her phone. "Ward Holdings faces internal leak, rumors of fraud surface." Her heart sank. She immediately called Adrian, but his assistant answered, saying he was in an emergency meeting with the board. That evening, she saw him on television, cornered by reporters outside the company headquarters. His eyes looked colder than she had ever seen. When she arrived at the mansion later that night, the air inside felt heavier than the storm outside. "They are trying to destroy me," he said as soon as she stepped in. One of the board members leaked the story. "They are claiming I forged financial reports and used company funds for personal reasons." "That is ridiculous," she said. "You have done everything right." He turned toward her, frustration etched across his face. "Right. Does not matter when power is at stake. They found out about the contract, the photos, the hospital records, everything." Elara froze. You mean they know about us? They are calling it fraud, he said bitterly. A fake engagement to manipulate sympathy for the company after my mother's death. They want me to step down. She felt her pulse quicken. Adrian, this will ruin you. He met her gaze with something like regret. It already has. You should go before they drag your name into it too. Her throat tightened. Do you really think I would walk away now? This is not your fight, Elara, he said, his voice rising. It was never supposed to be real, remember? The words hit her like glass breaking. She stared at him, searching for the man who had once looked at her like she was the only truth left in his world. Then maybe I was the only one who believed it was. She turned before he could speak again. The heavy door shut behind her with a dull echo, leaving Adrian alone with the sound of the rain hammering against the glass. Outside, Elara stood under the awning, the sapphire ring still on her finger. She wanted to rip it off, to end the illusion, but she could not. The storm soaked through her coat, but she did not move. The lie had begun as a contract. Now, it was tearing them apart for real. Days turned into weeks, and Manchester seemed colder than ever. Elara had moved back to her small apartment above the bakery, the one that still smelled faintly of coffee and rain. She tried to focus on her job at the foundation, but her mind refused to forget the look on Adrian Ward's face that night. The words he had said, "It was never supposed to be real," still echoed inside her like a bruise that refused to fade. One evening, as she was locking up, a woman in a gray coat appeared at the door. She looked familiar, calm, precise, with a face that carried quiet authority. "You are Elara, right?" the woman asked. "My name is Margaret Hale, legal counsel for Ward Holdings. We need to talk." Elara hesitated. "If this is about the contract, I have already." Margaret raised a hand. "It is not about that. It is about who leaked the documents. You were not the one under investigation, Elara. The leak came from inside the company, someone close to the board." Elara frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Adrian has been suspended," Margaret said softly, "and he refused to defend himself. He said protecting you was enough." The words hit Elara like a jolt. "He did what?" "He took full responsibility," Margaret continued. "He said the engagement was his idea alone, and that you were only helping his mother. He signed a statement that clears you completely." For a moment, Elara could not breathe. She pressed a hand to her chest, the ring still hanging from a chain around her neck. The realization sank in Adrian had sacrificed everything for her. That night, she walked through the rain to the Ward mansion. It was dark now, the once grand house, feeling empty without the hum of staff or the scent of Mrs. Ward's roses. She found Adrian in the library, surrounded by boxes of files and shattered silence. He looked up when she entered. His eyes were tired, but when he saw her, something flickered in them. Relief, disbelief, maybe even hope. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "I had to be," she replied. "You took the blame for something I agreed to." "It was my idea," he said simply, "and it ruined everything." Elara stepped closer, shaking her head. "No, Adrian. It revealed everything. Maybe this was never meant to be about a lie. Maybe it was about what we were too afraid to admit." He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed softly, the sound breaking through the heaviness between them. "You are still the only person who can argue with me and make sense." She smiled faintly. "And you are still the only man who can make me believe in something that should have been impossible." Outside, the rain softened against the windows, the city lights glowing, like quiet witnesses. For the first time in weeks, they stood close again, neither speaking, both knowing that the truth, no matter how messy, had finally begun to heal what the lie had broken. Spring came late to Manchester, washing the city in a pale gold light that touched even the grayest corners. The Ward estate had begun to come alive again, windows open, curtains fluttering in the breeze, the faint scent of roses drifting from the garden that Mrs. Ward had once tended with care. Elara stood near the same window where she had first met Adrian's mother months ago. The sapphire ring that once symbolized a lie now glowed faintly on her finger, its meaning entirely different. She turned when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Adrian Ward entered quietly, dressed simply, no longer the sharp-edged billionaire surrounded by walls of control. He looked more like a man learning to breathe again. "The board reinstated me," he said. "The investigation is over. They discovered who leaked the documents, someone from the inside. It is done." Elara smiled softly. "I heard," Margaret told me. "Congratulations, Adrian." He moved closer, stopping just a step away. "That is not what I came to tell you," he said. "I came to say thank you for staying, for not giving up on what was never supposed to be real." She met his eyes, calm but certain. "It was real, Adrian. Maybe not the way it began, but every moment since your mother took my hand, it was real." For a moment, the room fell into gentle silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, the same deep blue as the Manchester sky outside. "This time," he said quietly, opening it to reveal the ring she had once worn. "No contracts, no signatures, no pretend." Her breath caught. "Adrian." He smiled. "Just a question." He took her hand, his thumb tracing the faint tremor in her fingers. "Will you stay not as my fiancée for a promise that ends, but as the woman I choose for everything after?" Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from surprise, but from the calm certainty that this was where she was meant to be. "Yes," she whispered, "but only if you promise no more rain-soaked goodbyes." He laughed softly, the sound echoing through the open hall. "Deal." They stepped out into the garden, the sky clearing above them. Sunlight glinted off the ring as he slipped it back onto her finger, the sapphire catching the light like a quiet vow reborn. Manchester stretched beyond the gates, wet streets, laughter, the hum of life moving forward. The world had changed, and so had they. What began as a contract had turned into a home built on truth. As they walked through the garden hand in hand, the camera might have pulled back, catching the house bathed in gold light, the ring gleaming like a promise kept. If you want more Untold Billionaire love, subscribe and choose your next chapter on screen.